We'll call the meeting to order at 7:05. I do expect that others will join. As others join, Tim, if you can record the time that they join, if someone leaves, if you can record that as well. So we have a couple of administrative items. While we're waiting, I'm going to reach out to Attorney Bobrowski. I don't think I've heard from him. Okay, so while we're waiting for Attorney Bobrowski to join in as well, I'm sending him. Couple of administrative items. So if anyone from the public would like to participate in public engagement before we get started, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, the way these meetings typically run is they're fairly open, and we do allow participation through the meetings themselves. So I know that we've got at least one member. If you'd like to speak now, you can, or if you'd like to speak at another point, that's welcome. You're welcome to do so. Okay, with that, let's dispense. We've got the minutes themselves. We've got 3 sets of minutes due to just timings of when these were made available and getting onto the agenda appropriately. So first one we have is the minutes from December 18th, 2023.
Move to accept the minutes.
So Anna's moving to accept the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Anna's made the motion to accept the minutes. Kevin has seconded. So Tim is typing out as feverishly as he can. Who's making the motion, seconding them. With that, any discussion on the minutes for December 18th? So the only item that I have to add to that is the actual date of the minutes themselves, because I didn't see that on there. It was in the file name, it just wasn't printed, so administratively I will add that. Otherwise, they list when the meeting was called to order, who was there, the meetings were all done by roll call, and had a summary of the items themselves. Any discussion on the minutes for December 18th? Go ahead, Eric.
I noticed that we had a manual about how to run minutes, committees, and on page 7, it talks about the committee's letterhead shall be used as supplied by the town administrator's office. I think we had no such thing occur.
We have not received anything formalized from and the guide on how to run committees is not a binding document. It's merely guidelines.
Okay.
So it's the point is well taken. It's guidelines that were created by the town administrator's office, and they request the boards that report to the town council follow them as much as they can, but it's very much a work in process.
I chaired a committee 50 years ago, and John McCarthy suggested I had letterheads, and I said I didn't need them because it could do stuff like that. We did not have Xeroxing or internet or whatever in those days. I am suggesting that when our letterhead should state the meeting number, because the meeting number, then you know you got all the meetings in order. And the next thing is I would list the members, Dan and then Ann, and then the next, then two more.
The information's all there. It may not be in the format that is consistent from it, largely is dependent upon who takes the minutes. But what's important is that the minutes exist. The format is actually not the format is not legislatively required.
I was just suggesting that if you list, you'd have the whole thing present there. Then you draw a line under it, and below that is the minutes themselves. And the first thing is you'd say who was present, and you just use the initials. Saves a lot of typing. I'm lazy that way. Thank you for listening to me.
Absolutely. Other comments on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor. So we will do roll call vote in the order in which you are on my screen. So Kevin.
Yes.
First. Tim.
Yes.
Eric, you're third?
Yes.
Yes. And you're fourth?
Yes.
And I'm fifth. So that we have these minutes approved. These are unanimously approved. I will go ahead, put the appropriate markings on them and send them off for processing by the town administrator's office and town clerk. Second set of minutes is February 5th. While this actually doesn't require formalized approval because it doesn't constitute a legal meeting, we lack quorum, I recommend that we do actually approve the minutes as they were taken, just for consistency's sake, and that way people who want to know what happened since the meeting was called would be able to see what happened. There doesn't seem to be any harm in having the minutes exist, even though it wasn't technically a meeting. It was considered more of a gathering. So with that, do we have a motion to accept the minutes of February 5th?
So moved.
Ante makes the motion. Do we have a second? Who's fast on the buzzer?
Second.
Kevin is fast on the buzzer for the second. Tim is fast on the typing. So with that, we've got the minutes for February 5th, the February 5th gathering, because again, lacking quorum, it wasn't technically a meeting, but it does have all of the various elements of it. There were no formalized votes beyond actually, we didn't even have a vote to adjourn because it wasn't technically a meeting. So there's no votes actually recorded at that particular meeting, but it does otherwise have the time that the meeting started, ended, and the discussion itself. Any questions about these minutes? With that, again, take vote in the order in which it appears. Kevin.
I'll abstain since I wasn't in attendance for that one.
Tim.
I'm going to abstain as well.
Eric.
I abstain. I have to.
You don't have to. Just because a person isn't at the meeting, it doesn't mean they have to abstain. You can, of course. Anne?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So with that, we have two in favor, none against, 3 abstentions. That vote will pass. So that one will be deemed appropriate. That brings us over to the third set of minutes for February 21st, our last meeting at 7:01. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of February 21st?
So moved.
Anne is very quick on the so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Kevin is quick on the second. Tim is still quick on the typing of taking all of these notes. So with that, it shows when the meeting started, where it was, who was present, who wasn't, and that we actually have the minutes done by roll call. Any feedback on these minutes from February 21st? Okay, with that, we'll go to vote for approval of these minutes from February 21st. Kevin.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Eric.
I abstain.
Anne.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we have 4 in favor, no negatives, and 1 abstention. So with that, minutes are approved. I will update the footers of each of these to indicate the approvals and send those on. With that, it brings us over to item 4, reviewing the zoning bylaws. Thank you, Attorney Bobrowski, for joining us this evening. Much appreciated. And with that, we have
You're welcome.
we have focus expected on definitions, districts, use tables, things along those lines. With that, we'll let you take over the areas that you'd like to discuss.
Okay. What we need to do now, Mr. Chairman, is make some hard initial decisions on what's going to make it into the second draft. The first draft's been done since the beginning of January. And I had hoped tonight that we would go through the use table. I think that's always fun and difficult. And there are several other sections that I know we have a meeting agenda for the 1st of April, which involves your upcoming town meeting warrant. So after that meeting, what I'd like to do is that section on the performance standards that I gave to you. I think tonight, if there's time permitting, I'd like to at least outline the sign issue. Having now read, I'm sure I'm the only human ever to have read both the sign bylaw, generic bylaw, and the overlay district bylaw, which dwarfs the main bylaw. But I think I have a recommendation and I want everybody to sign off on that, because that sign overlay district really does take up a huge number of pages in the bylaw. I don't see any way around keeping it. So let's, if everybody is of a same mind as me, let's do the use table, and I'm going to let me dig it out of my file here. It's the one thing I didn't set up. Hang on.
Is this the table of uses?
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I will share. Okay, is everyone able to see the use table?
Hang on.
Yep.
I'm going to call it up on my screen here momentarily. Got it. Can I share screen, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. I will stop sharing and now you can share.
Come on here. Did I lose you?
No, we're still here.
Okay, hang on. I had to, for some reason, I could not connect on Zoom.
If you need me to share, not a problem.
Well, now I can't find Zoom.
Welcome, Joe. So Tim, if
Hey,
you
Dan.
can
Oh,
record
there we
that
go.
Joe's joining us at
All right,
7:19.
all right, so I'm going to share screen.
Did I miss anything?
We approved the minutes already, and we're just getting started on the table of uses.
All right, thanks.
And Attorney Bobrowski, if you'd like me to share, I can do that if that would be easier for you.
Just let me have a crack at this here. That's how to do it. Can you see that?
It looks like it's coming up and
Yep.
yes, we can see it. Excellent.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So let's take this one section at a time. So the first is residential uses, and I don't think there's anything in here that is changed other than probably need to take creative development as an overlay district, isn't it?
It's an overlay district, but there's no known map for it that I've been able to find.
And how do we want to resolve that issue in terms of either mapping it or making it a thing instead of an overlay district? And by a thing, I mean that it would be more or less like mixed use development. That's a thing.
Can you say that
So-
again?
Yeah, so if you look at the thing above it, mixed use development or open space development, those are things, they're not districts. I can do open space development or mixed use development in the districts that say SP, PB, whatever. And you have some instructions in the creative development language that suggest that it could be a thing. In other words, instead of classifying it as a district, it would be like number 11, number 10 or number 9.
That's
Either that or
helpful.
map it. Either that or map it. If we put it on the map, now it's its own district. And it looks to me like if we mapped it, it would probably overlay the MR, B, LI, and I districts because it's not allowed anywhere else. So I could say that the creative development is an overlay district overlying MR, I'm sorry, MR, B, LI, or I. Or I could say creative development is the development of property in the following way, and it's allowed in the following districts, and you can just look at the chart. I think it should be a thing, if you want my opinion.
So with that, are there any initial comments on ways to handle this, members of the committee?
What's considered creative development? I mean, let me start with that. What would be an example of that?
Okay, so right now, creative development has been recodified as, hang on, 9.7 if you have the ability to call up the full first draft. And it says that the CDOD is an overlay district superimposed over the underlying district shown on a map entitled blank. I've got that highlighted. And then essentially what it says is that in the creative district overlay district, or let's just call it creative district, I can have subject to site plan approval. Doesn't really give me the uses because this is supposed to be in the overlay district. It requires a concept plan, and it looks to me like it requires a traffic analysis, a verbal and graphic analysis to ensure compatibility, an assessment of the impacts on natural resources, residential uses. I think what this is really an invitation for new ideas to come forward here. Because it really doesn't say A, B, and C are allowed. Instead, it has some basic rules with regard to parking, building height, lot area, and uses. But for example, it says any use allowed in at least one of the districts under a given creative development is allowed at any location within the creative development. So when I use this as a model, I typically call it something like planned development district. And by planned development district, I mean, bring your best foot forward. Tell me what you want to do. It isn't in the book today. And tell me where you want to do this and the other details that you can give me about your site. And then literally you're writing a new district for it. And it's a one-off. I'll give you an example from Haverhill up the road. When we did a planned development district in the new ordinance in the city of Haverhill, one of the longtime banquet halls went out of business over in Bradford. Wasn't a big parcel, might have been 6 acres. And the family just was done. After COVID, they didn't want to do banquets anymore. The property was purchased by Princeton Properties, which is a major multifamily developer. And they wanted to do multifamily with a small piece of commercial retail, but the property wasn't zoned for that. So they drew their picture. They showed it to the mayor. The mayor said, I like it. It's better than a dead banquet hall. They brought it, they wrote it, they showed me the picture. I wrote up the zoning for it. We brought it to the city council. The city council passed it. It's a standalone creative district, meaning one of a kind. It's not spot zoning. I'm not worried about spot zoning, and you shouldn't either. So it allows people with a good idea to come forward where there is no zoning in place that allows them to do what they want to do, create a new district, and go forward from there. It really works. I think it's one of the best tools there is out there. I mean, right now, for example, Emerson Hospital is selling 11 acres of land directly across the street here in Concord. And it's 7 house lots, each zoned 80,000 square feet. And they know that the biggest bang they're going to get for their buck is not for 7 house lots, or 5, actually would only be 5 house lots. They know that the biggest bang for the buck they're going to get is a brand new idea that will feed off the proximity of the hospital and allow for something like assisted living or mixed use or independent living. So they're soliciting, bids close like in a week. They're soliciting ideas from the community. National developers have responded, and I'm sure all of them pretty much have the same idea. They're not going to settle for 5 homes. They're going to go to town meeting with a brand new zoning bylaw, and they're going to say, this is the creative development that I want to do on this parcel. And I think that's what this is.
Okay.
It's fun because you're going to get on the parcel, you're going to get really, somebody's dream. And if it's a good enough dream that the town meeting decides they should do it and go along with it, it works for everybody. This is the way Burlington and Lexington have developed over the last 15 years. When they tear down something in Burlington in the 40, 50-year-old mall and replace it with the district, for example, if you know where the Bancroft is, that's a creative development. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. It's a one-off district that they've created, and it went through town meeting on a 2/3 vote, and they're building it out as they said they would build it out. You have to stay pretty faithful to what you sell at town meeting.
I'm curious if we've ever, if I don't think Brian's on the horn here, but I'm curious if we've been using this at all lately, or if it's, has it just been on here? This was already on here, right? But this wasn't added.
Correct. This was 190/95 that was adopted in 2004 when I looked it up in the existing E-code. And because there's no overlay, I can't see that it was ever actually used. It looks like it was adopted in anticipation of there being the possibility of use, but with no map, so that it could effectively be used for spot zoning is my interpretation of it. But with that, I think what Attorney Bobrowski is saying makes a lot of sense, to make it a use as a thing as opposed to an overlay. We have lots of overlays. We're looking at adding more overlays. So anything that I think that can help flatten the uses in a way that's responsible makes sense. That's my 2 cents. But I think you're on to something, Joe. This is an existing concept that I think was done to allow for simplification of ideas.
Could
Yeah, so I
it,
agree. I would get rid of the overlay then. Then that would be my opinion. I'd stick with you. Yeah.
yeah, I think that makes sense too. I wonder, could that have been used for where the old Converse building was at the head of the lake?
I don't, I don't know the property enough to answer the question. I mean, I can tell you where I've used it before with a planned development district, and it's normally in a city. Downtown Quincy is 2 or 3 different planned development districts. If any of you know Hartwell Avenue that parallels 128 on the west side, just below Bedford is Hartwell Avenue, and it runs pretty much all the way down to the Route 20 exit. And all of that is Lexington, surprisingly. It's not Bedford. And virtually every parcel in there is its own, it's called the planned development district. And each of them is different because the zoning is different on each of those parcels. It's one of a kind zoning, and it was allowed by town meeting for that specific use to develop in that specific way on that specific parcel. That's what we're talking about. So the developer will typically come to the planning department, and the planning department will get it in front of the selectmen. Usually it's a late night. Obviously it's posted, but there's a conversation that goes on between the developer and the select board. Do you want me to push this idea or not? Or are you dead against it? And if the board of selectmen says, well, show us more, then it builds from there. And you can call it off at any time. If the developer burns his bridges and it's not an idea that the select board or the planning department want to continue with, it dies on the vine. But I mean, think of this. Dedham has an intergenerational campus on the top of a hill overlooking the Charles River. Who has intergenerational campus in their zoning book? Nobody. But this was a one-off idea by Hebrew Senior Living to combine the Rashi School, K to 12, also a long-term care facility, an assisted living facility, a child care center, and an independent living apartment complex. It's basically on 10 or 15 acres on a 100-acre parcel. The other 85, 90 acres is open space. One of a kind. I don't know of another place like that in Commonwealth. It's one of a kind. And it had to go through town meeting because they had no zoning that said intergenerational campus.
And it works. That particular property, it works really well. Person can go there from effectively cradle to, well, the other end.
Yeah. I think the kids study the old people and the old people help with the young people. At least that's what I was told their plan was starting out.
That was the plan. I'm not sure that it quite works that way and it's smooth, but people do get the benefit of intergenerational exposure.
Yeah. So I have a stock and trade plan development bylaw, and I think what I would do is either rename what you have plan development or just re-envision my bylaw to say creative development instead of plan development.
I'm thinking politically, if we keep the name creative development, it will probably generate, it'll probably generate less issues when we present this, because it will be substantively, again, just recodifying the existing concepts but cleaning it up, which
Yeah.
is the whole purpose of going through this exercise in the first place.
That sounds like a good idea.
Others' thoughts? Because we'll all have to be together defending this at town meeting, and we want to make sure that we're all together as much as we possibly can be. That becomes very, very prescient a year from now, when I expect that this will go before town meeting.
So that's what I'll do. Unless I hear differently, I'm going to give you my best shot at filling the gap. You have really nothing to go by here. But what I can give you is, and I'll do it before I fold it in, I'll give it to you in a separate file to look at. But
Okay, and I'll get that posted. We have been posting all of our almost all of the files, anything that's ready for consumption. We've been posting to the bylaw website, and people are actually looking at them.
Okay, good. Well, then I hope that they've also seen the senior housing facility bylaw, which I believe I added to the first draft.
You
And
did,
you-
and we have gotten some questions about it.
Okay. So I noticed that you had, for example, an assisted living facility overlay district, but obviously that's just tied into assisted living facilities. And there's a whole range of options for seniors and housing, starting with independent. And then, this is my family history for the past 20 years. My parents now are both gone, but they lived in Florida in a single family house until the marathon bombing weekend, really. And they were 84, I think, when they finally moved, maybe 82, when they finally moved halfway back to North Carolina, 2 siblings there. So they first lived in Independent. It was a facility more like an apartment building, but it had some common features like dining facility. You could cook, or you could, have a swipe card and you paid a bill. It had community facilities like a library and a exercise area. It was, a library, church services, that kind of thing. Eventually, and sooner than you think, you need assisted living, because if you're, assisted living is for people with 2 or more deficiencies in activities of daily life. Activities in daily life are things like dressing, bathing, cooking, taking medicine, doing physical therapy. And sooner than you know it, some people need a memory facility because dementia sets in. And sooner than you know it, some people need a long-term care facility because, assisted living is just what it says. It's assisted. But as I said to my mother, what's the difference between assisted living and long-term care? She said, when you ring the bell in an assisted living facility, they might come in 2 hours. When you're ringing in a long-term care facility, they probably come in 2 minutes. And then at the end, there's congregate care, which is a mixture or a combination of one or more of these components. So why not have all of that? I mean, baby boom is baby boom. We're all headed for some of these. We're all headed for one of these places. And why make people move? Why not let an assisted living facility have a long-term care component?
I love that idea, Mark. And I think that was the vision of a lot of discussions we had on the Board of Selectmen, our town council, years ago. So I think having a definition that allows us to have more flexibility lines up with what the town was thinking about.
And I'm in agreement with that. I just want to make sure that, because the existing overlay is very specific, it's only been used once and with one parcel. Just want to make sure that we're not losing anything for that facility, even though yes, they would be grandfathered in. We just want to make things, because while it is called assisted living, it is actually more of a senior living in the way that it's actually been written and used. So I'm all in favor of renaming it. It's just a matter of making sure it's all of the existing elements. This is part of what Attorney McGrail was trying to bring up last time.
I can add some provision to the senior living that says, to the extent something is already permitted, under the old assisted living facility overlay district. It's grandfathered under this bylaw. And the question is, will it play by the old rules, which are going to be wiped out? Well, I don't want to keep them in. It's just going to take up too much space. Odds are the old assisted living facility already permitted needed a special permit anyway.
It did. It was more of that there were different exceptions for parking and other components to meet certain. There was very specific density requirements. So if you take a look at the existing language, you'll see that where the way that it was designed was to reflect the fact that there was a significant amount of independent living, and to prevent it from being too geared towards any one type of living. And I think it's in purpose substantively the same as senior housing. It's just, I just want to make sure that we're not substantively changing those components, because that is politically such a hot topic. That particular bylaws do the pieces it got affiliated with, that we just want to make it as minimal change as possible. So if we're changing the name, I don't think that'll be a big deal. If we're changing any other aspects of it, I think that it becomes very difficult for people, will become difficult for people to accept. And if the word garage appears, don't touch it with a 20-foot pole.
So can I broaden it out to go from independent to congregate? Is that a major change that people will object to?
As long as the way that it's the way that it's currently set up. So if you take a look at the definitions of that overlay district, you'll see it's not really assisted living. It really is senior housing.
Okay.
There are some areas that we have a lot of flexibility, that I think we will have a lot of flexibility. Some areas where we'll have almost none. Changing the creative development, I don't think will be a problem. Changing elements of it, I don't see as being an issue. Changing what is currently the assisted living overlay, we want to make sure that we're not causing problems for the existing properties, and that we're not changing the components under which it was given the special permit. So that it has to do with the local environment more than anything else. But changing the title of it, I think, makes complete sense. Changing the definition insofar that it accomplishes the goal of true senior housing, I think makes complete sense. I just want to make sure the mechanics aren't going to cause us to get into a football issue.
All right, well, I'll do the best I can, and then you'll tell me if I didn't do good enough. So, all right, so I'm on B. These first three, 1, 2, and 3, are the uses that are going to be subject to Dover Amendment site plan review. These are the three sacred uses under the Dover Amendment. They're all to be treated the same way. That's why you see the crossouts in 3, where you had no's, SPs. You can't do that. Childcare is just like a school or a church. Judge Rubin or Roberts in the land court just had a case where Needham put a childcare center on special permit, and then they denied it, and the provider sued Needham, and Judge Roberts didn't go any further than saying you can't do that, and so therefore the use is allowed, period. That was just in the fall of last year. But I had the original case in Westwood many years ago in the 90s, Petrucci versus Town of Westwood. They said I needed it was in an old barn. They said I needed a special permit to modify a non-conforming structure. I said no. They said I needed a variance because it was too close to the side and rear. I said no. They said I needed site plan review. I said no. And at the end of the day, Judge Lombardi, I remember correctly, said yes. And that's the way it's supposed to be for churches, schools, and childcare centers.
Mark,
There's a legislative history here that says You know, I think it goes back to 1989, and it says there's a serious shortage of this in the Commonwealth. We're tired of people in the neighborhoods saying no, and we're going to make you allow them wherever they want to go. That's basically the history.
Mark, I have a quick question for you. Where do rehab and halfway houses fall with this? Do they have, don't,
You have to be
isn't that something that
careful.
you can't deny them? Sorry.
Well, it depends on their model. So some halfway houses are deemed educational uses where they're nonprofit, and that's not very common. Halfway houses are usually for profit. But if it's got a counseling component, it would be considered educationally exempt. Even though they're living there and that's probably the principal use, the counseling takes it from being a house to being basically an educational use. The other protection afforded to these facilities is federal disability law. So you have to be very careful where the people in the sober house are recovering drug or alcohol users. They have to be recovering. Then federal disability law protects them. And that means they're protected under the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, or the Federal Fair Housing Act amendments of 1988. And it's really powerful medicine for a municipality to have to take if you screw it up, because it's a civil rights violation. It opens you up to attorney's fees and costs. And it's the kind of thing that I wanted to make sure wouldn't happen to you. So one of the things we added to chapter 10 on procedures was provision on reasonable accommodations for these types of facilities, so that everybody, it went to a committee where one person, particularly the building commissioner, wasn't just making decisions off by shooting from the hip and getting you in trouble. So that's the other thing we're trying to reckon with there.
All right, so we don't need a separate line item for that. It falls within these.
Yeah, these are generic, especially the number 2. It's amazing what educational uses cover.
Okay.
Home for battered women, home for people, with special needs, education programs for people with. I used to say this covers, and then I had a sentence. X footnote, Y footnote, Z footnote. Well, now that's like 26 footnotes at this point in time. Bible camp for children who play capture the flag after lunch. Check. I'm serious. There's a case. That's an educationally protected use. It's all driven by court decisions. So whenever there's a court decision, I'm adding another footnote.
Yeah, thank you.
The rest of these are pretty straightforward. The railroad local passenger station would be, it would typically be MBTA, which is a state authority. And as long as they're providing essential services, they would fall under essential services, the next thing down. That's a little different, by the way. You don't have to allow all that. They're supervised, essential services, public utilities, things of that sort, are supervised by DTE and DPU. And you can make them get a special permit, but if you play too hard, they'll go to DPU and they'll override you. So why not, at least try to exercise some municipal control. If it breaks down, it breaks down. I've actually seen cases in the last 3 years where the utility goes immediately to DPU and says, this town's always had a history of playing unfair. Let us have a free pass from the beginning. And where that's the case, DPU will give them a free pass from the beginning.
So actually, before you go past that, real quick question.
Yeah.
The municipal utility service or provider, which we do have because we have our own municipal gas and light. Right now, that is only allowed in business and industrial. Would there be any I'm trying to figure out if there would need to be a change for that, if they wanted to add in more substations. We're trying an energy park, a battery park. And so if would we actually have to do a zoning change, or should we potentially expand that? Would you recommend that we expand it, requiring it to go to the Board of Appeals if they wanted to do something? But so as the infrastructure changes, they don't have to request a zoning change before that. Thoughts?
Well, you could, I don't know, what district is the battery facility?
It's next to a school. It's in a state
So
forest.
is it in the LB or the, I'm sorry,
I
is it in
think
the
it's in, I
B or-
think it's an industrial offhand. I'm gonna look it up is what that technically is. Joe, do you know offhand?
No,
The
sorry.
energy park?
Dan, the whole high school area is in a single residence, I believe, looking at the map.
Well,
This would be,
I think, Mr. Chairman, that you ought to find out what district they're proposing this in, and then we should change it. If it's not already a BA, we should change it to a BA.
so it's it's right next to, it's off Hemlock Road. Let's see. It's forest right now, so I'm not sure what that would be zoned as. There we go, zoning overlay, that, it's general residence.
Yeah, so you change number 10 in GR to BA.
And I'm wondering if we should just do it basically BA across the board for that. So if they decide to add in others, it doesn't require a multi-year process to go through, request the zoning change, and then to request it. So that it, in some ways, streamline while still allowing for approval. Thoughts?
Yeah, now note that essential services are not allowed in the SSR. Would you allow these number 10 municipal utility services in the SSR? Or do you want to keep that a no? And then if you tell me to change that to a BA across the board, I'm going to say, why don't you change number 12 to BA across the board?
What is the definition of essential services?
It's public utilities run by others than you. So it would be telephone exchanges, it would be water, but if you have your own, if you're your own provider, that wouldn't apply. It's basically quasi-monopolistic public corporations, public service corporations.
I'd almost think to keep the first two out, SSR and single residence, my thoughts, but I don't know. For some reason, that makes more sense to me, but. And then general residence all the way up would be fine, but I don't know. I guess you can have this argument.
I'm actually I'm in agreement with you, Joe, on that. That I think that the idea of keeping the single residences will address the practical concern of there being too much urbanization too quickly. So that this way, where there is higher density, we allow for the expanded uses to support that higher density.
So I'm hearing that in B10 and B12, the first two columns, SSR and SR, in both 10 and 12 ought to be no. And then after that, everything should be a BA all the way to the end.
Correct. Yep.
The only thing I'm
Okay.
wondering about is for essential services, which would be just single residence, is it needed for essential services?
Well, a public service corporation generally has access to DPU or DTE, so they're going to override you if they're in those districts and you're not playing fair.
Okay. In which case, I think your proposal makes a lot of sense. Thoughts?
Okay. All right.
Kevin, you deal with more of the planning side than a lot of us. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I'm just wondering why essential services wasn't set up as a no for SSR and SR from the beginning, which we probably don't have the answer to, but I think that change is fine.
I think the old use table said something, it just said public utility or something like that.
I think you get a better vote count on that one also. If you start encroaching on the single residence, people start getting nervous.
Yeah, there's a lot of votes there. You're right. All right, I'm on to agriculture, probably the easiest thing you got going here.
Oh,
So
you didn't hear the last meeting of the planning board, so I'm not so sure about that.
Oh, all right.
The particular type of agriculture was discussed heavily.
What was it?
Marijuana.
Oh,
Next
So
to
you-
next to a school.
I don't know what agriculture for domestic use only, I guess that's like a backyard garden? So the way the statute, you're not exactly green acres over there. The way the statute breaks down is it says that if I've got 5 acres or 2 qualified acres, and 2 qualified acres, an acre is qualified if it has $1,000 of gross proceeds annually in agriculture. And the statute says that even if you say no, the statute overrides it and says yes. And agriculture means agriculture, horticulture, floriculture, viticulture, aquaculture, silviculture. So it's basically pigs and trees and whatever else fits within those 6 or 7 iterations of the word. I interpret agriculture for domestic use only to be the extra zucchini that I keep growing every year in my backyard. Reservation, conservation, or wildlife preserve, that's good. It's not really agriculture, but it is an extensive use. And then outdoor commercial recreation, I would define that to mean golf, tennis, things that are pretty much spread out, especially golf. And I don't have any entry there because I didn't see any entry for this kind of a use previously.
So I'm looking at agriculture right now. The definition in the existing table is agriculture, horticulture, or floriculture use for domestic use only is the way that it's defined.
Oh, okay. So it's agriculture, horticulture, floriculture?
Correct.
What that's saying is that on any parcel size, I can have horticulture and floriculture. You get into what you don't want to say is agriculture, because agriculture includes swine. It includes fur-bearing animals who stink to high heaven. So if you said horticulture and floriculture for domestic use only on a parcel with less than 5 acres or less than 2 qualified acres, you'd get what you want, which is no pigs, but you can still grow flowers.
And what about chickens? Because we do have quite a few houses with chickens.
Okay, so chickens generally need another entry, right? I would say something along the lines that you could have birds kept, is it commercial chicken farm or is it?
No, it's for personal
birds?
use.
So,
It's backyard birds
okay.
for people's own use and to feed the coyotes,
well,
sadly.
that would be an accessory use that you would want to add because it's not a principal use.
Right.
Let me just make sure that we don't have that in accessory uses already.
Mark, we
Um,
had a significant pig farm in the past, so I don't know if that was focused on if that line. We no longer have one, and I don't think we want one ever again, but we had one for a
Nobody
long time.
knows. Yeah. So I can show you something on chickens as an accessory use, but what it would basically, what would be best is if your Board of Health passed a Board of Health regulation too.
They do.
They do. They have one.
Okay, so I'll look that up, and I'll see how to merge the two things. And that's where that would go.
Okay, in which case we should probably change the agriculture to be the horticulture and floriculture.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do that right there. And then when we go through the rest of the sections on the use table, I'm going to look for things that are outdoor commercial recreation and cross-reference them back here.
And I don't think we have any locations that are big enough for outdoor recreation anymore. It used to be going back 75 years or so.
Yeah. All right, so these are just sort of more in the potpourri area here. Membership clubs, nonprofit.
Which we do have.
School or educational use for-profit would be, Hank's Taekwondo studio or something. Miss Cindy School for Dance, something along those lines. They're not nonprofit. A personal service establishment is typically a salon, a nail salon, a barbershop, as opposed to a general service establishment, which is typically a repair shop for household appliances like an upholsterer or small appliance repair, that kind of thing, furniture repair. In the middle, there is indoor commercial recreation, and those terms, theater, cinema, bowling alley, go to the definition. So you've got outdoor and you've got indoor. I could move outdoor to follow indoor, and then they'd be together. Do you want me to do that?
I think that would make sense.
Okay, let me go back and make a note to myself.
Does it need to be different than the indoor?
They are different in that your outdoor, indoor is typically the things that you'd see listed here.
I'm just wondering if they meet, if we just combine them into one line.
No, because they're very different in terms of their neighborhood impacts.
Okay.
One is a place of assembly and the other one has no place to assemble. The building code would call any of these uses here places of assembly, and then the construction standards would have to follow. All right, so then there's hotel, body art, registered dispensary, adult entertainment. I'm going to caution you so that we can run the tape back if you ever get in trouble. Adult entertainment establishments have to allow a reasonable opportunity for the speech. It's a First Amendment issue. So you have to allow a reasonable area. They don't have to be open for, renting today. They have to be available on the market generally. But typically in a town there's two cases in Massachusetts that jump out. One is Tingsboro, a town with about 10,000 acres, and less than 1% of it was available for adult entertainment, and the court said that that was sufficient. Medford had a similar case. They had a city block available. It was, I believe, 1.2% of the city, and the court said that was not enough. So that's kind of the parameters of the fight. you'd probably fall somewhere in the middle. You've got more people than Tingsboro, less people than Medford. And I don't know the size of your city vis-a-vis Tingsboro and Medford.
Closer to
But if you're
Medford
just
than
putting,
Tingsboro.
if you're just putting people in a swamp, it's a civil rights violation. Because it's speech. It's protected speech under the First Amendment. Just a word. That's just a word of warning.
And that's where it's currently allowed. I don't see a need to change that.
Okay. No, I don't want to change it.
I look at that as let sleeping dogs lie.
Nothing makes me feel more like a pervert at town meeting than having to defend the adult entertainment bylaw.
So before we go on to that, we don't have to, it was just right above the adult entertainment was marijuana dispensaries.
Yes, there were a series of marijuana uses there, right?
And just knowing that that is a current topic, I just want to make sure that that's clear because that's going to be discussed ad nauseum at town meeting. There's two actually at this coming town meeting. There's 2 articles on this topic. So the registered dispensary, would that be a dispensary? Would be a medical dispensary?
Yes, RMD.
Okay, and the marijuana establishment right now is listed as no across the board. Is that permissible?
What did the town vote at the referendum? Were you a no or a yes?
And you're on mute.
I think we were a no.
No, then that's okay.
I think so. Please don't hold me to that, but I also think if the vote were taken today, it would be different.
Well, they turned out to be nothing more than package stores, so I agree with you.
I think we talked about this before, and it was a situation where it was kind of punted, like a no until a certain date, but we passed that date.
Well, what you have there is today okay if you were a no at the referendum. And in order to change from a no to a yes, I think you have to go back to the voters somehow, but I don't remember the exact provisions of the law. My partner, Jonathan, is a speaker frequently at the Attorney General's marijuana seminars and conferences, so I'll just ask him.
Does he have access to the votes?
Probably just Google it and find it online. I will ask Jonathan to verify that. Okay, can I go on to restaurants?
Wakefield was a no. I just looked it up.
Was it no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was to legalize, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it was 52.6% no.
I think it was back in 16, if I remember
Correct.
correctly.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking it up. The WBUR makes it available easily.
Yeah. Yeah, my son bet me that it would pass, and I said, "You're nuts." Little did I know. All right, so restaurant use is not a whole lot here. I just added restaurant with a drive-through facility. I think drive-through facility was regulated before by special permit, so I just attached the cart to the horse, that's all.
Is there a need for it to be different than a fast food restaurant?
Not all fast food restaurants have drive-through.
Right, and I'm just wondering if because it's more expansive than the fast food restaurant. So I'm
I
just
can tell you
wondering.
right now, whenever a fast food restaurant is permitted without a drive-through, sometime in the next 2 years, they're coming back for the drive-through. What percent do you think a Dunkin' Donuts money comes in through the window?
80%.
70. That's pretty much the industry standard. Once you get a window, 70% of your revenue comes in through the window. People don't want to get out of
100%
their
of
car.
mine goes out through the app, so I can't tell you. It doesn't go through the window. Sorry.
All right, let me go to F, which I think is automobile related uses. At the definition we're going to have for motor vehicle light service is not your old mom and pop gas station with a dime Coca-Cola vending machine. It's the more modern new version of service station. So it's a combo. It's usually gas, convenience, and a window. The window is either donuts or whatever, but it's a window. So that's what would be allowed under this by special permit in those 3 districts.
Does that
Used to be
would that
you had to get 3 separate special permits, right? The gas would take a special permit, the convenience would take a special permit, and the donuts would take a special permit. Now you just need one for the combo.
so does that get into the types of fuel and so forth at all?
No.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because at the moment we have predominantly gasoline. There's one station that's going in that's going to provide diesel, which will be the first of its kind. And in the future, we may have I can envision them also possibly providing high power electric if they have the facility, if they're close enough to a substation where they can get the power.
Well, I'll just look at the definition there and I'll make sure that it allows for a variety of fuels.
Just as that part of the industry is changing, I think we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to do it because there's biodiesel. There's all sorts of different types of fuels that are coming into the usage.
Yeah. The one thing that you don't have here that most towns have is a car wash.
We do have car wash. It's attached to a light service station.
All right. So maybe I'll just move it to the definition of light service and add a car wash.
I'm not aware, other than the one that's attached to the Shell state. I think it's a Shell station. Anyone aware of?
Yeah, there's a standalone down on Water Street across from the
That's
liquor
true,
store.
yeah. There's 2, yeah, you're right. The drive-through, well, the automatic one. The automatic one went to the ZBA 3 years ago. They came to us for that to update it.
Okay. And does anybody know what district that would be in?
Not sure.
Is that the one that's near Nacella Playground?
Yes.
So that would be in the business district.
Okay, industrial uses.
The overlay maps, if people haven't used them, that you can get a link to from the town website from the building. The inspectional services is actually really cool for this stuff. That's what I'm using to do the lookup.
So I see warehouse or wholesale establishment. Do you have any large warehouse facilities at your 4-lane access points?
Large warehouses. There is, I think it would qualify as a large warehouse at the end of Audubon Road. Although I'm not sure it's currently in that use.
Yeah, these are, I mean, anywhere in eastern Massachusetts, by that I mean inside of certainly inside of Worcester, even south of Worcester. Any place there's a big piece of land that's open, you can bet somebody's making a run at it for 400 to 1,000,000 square feet of warehouse. And then I saw that you did not have anything on self-storage facility.
We're in the process of putting an overlay district in place for that.
An overlay for a self-storage facility?
Yes.
Why not just allow it in one of the regular districts?
I'm going to try to explain this. Others who are familiar with it, please by all means chime in. So the location where there is a proposed self-storage, going to be a self-storage facility that's being proposed, is in a location, I believe it's currently business. It's near Lake Quantapowhat. And so the idea was to do it as an overlay so it would not then be able to be expanded, and areas that are currently used for rental and other facilities, business rental, would not then be able to be used for self-storage. So the idea was to limit its size and make it smaller for self-storage. So almost spot zoning-ish to take a parcel that really has very limited use anyways, and make it so that would be an allowable use. That the key, I think, was really to protect the properties immediately around Lake Quantapowhat so they could not be turned into self-storage facilities without it going before town meeting. That's my understanding of the discussion as it was explained at the planning board meeting. So for those who have other knowledge of it, Kevin, I know you were at the meeting. Other thoughts on that?
I missed that one, so I didn't hear the presentation, but seeing the notes seems accurate.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? But that was the rationale about that.
Okay. Well, then that's probably going to come out. And it'll just be regulated in the overlay district. Unless you want me to put no across the board, but see new overlay district, I could do that.
It's probably, I would probably put it as, unless having an overlay creates where it is allowed. The idea is to not have self-storage. Right now it's allowed as a other use in business districts, because we do have a couple of them existing. And so I think the idea is to limit so that these uses don't pop up all in a variety of places without notice.
We'll fill that blank in when I see the town meeting vote.
Okay. And I think I sent you a link to the overlay district itself, the language.
Right, and then accessory uses. Family, what is that? Family daycare, is allowed unless you say something about it, it's allowed. But you are allowed to control, oddly, you cannot control a child care center with 175 kids. Family daycare home is an accessory use with up to 6 children, including resident participants. Family daycare home large is the same, but up to 10 kids, including resident participants. And my default position is usually, you already have a default position here.
So does that mean that we can get rid of our kids because we don't have a special permit?
I joked with my class for years that if you're going to put 10 kids next to me, I want a special permit hearing. That's for sure. So I would put BA across the board. Well, I think I'd just mimic it again. I think I'd put just exactly what you have for small, I'd put for large.
Is there a reason why they need to be different?
My default position is that small are allowed by right, at least in some of the districts, and that large are always allowed by special permit. But it's the same thing you were just describing, Dan. You know, you want a special permit hearing if there's going to be 10 kids screaming outside your window.
I'm just trying to figure out, do we need to have a distinction between small and large? That's really the question that I'm asking. Is that if there's a reason because of a court case or otherwise that it makes sense to, that's fine. I'm just trying not to have districts
No,
for the sake of
yeah.
having districts.
Why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
It was going to be the same anyway. So there you go.
Right.
So I had a question on 8. I thought we were talking about having it done by right on single residence accessory apartments. I know we had that discussion. Did that
I don't.
fall flat or?
I don't remember the discussion. So you're suggesting that in the SR it ought to be a Y?
I thought we brought that up. I mean, they come to us a lot lately. They've been doing this a lot, and that would, I remember having a discussion that would help our housing a little bit. I mean, it's not a ton,
Yeah.
but it's, I mean, I don't know how the town will feel about that, but that I did remember the discussion on having it done by right.
So I'm not sure. I think that could generate a lot of issues. I think the real key to that is to allow it by special permit, but to change what is permitted for the accessory apartment. So once the permit is granted, it's not limited to the family. Right now, the accessory apartments are limited to family members, and once that family member leaves, the permit is no longer valid. So that if a permit is allowed, that way there can be notice and so forth, and abutters can have input into it. But once the accessory use is allowed and that housing is added to the stock, then it would be permitted for whatever use as the special permit allows in that sense. I think that would be my 2 cents. So instead of making it by right, making it so it still goes to the Board of Appeals, but the way that of what's defined as an accessory apartment is a bit wider.
Yeah, you might be right. It was a while back, so keep it as BA.
I would keep it as BA and just make sure that what's allowed for the accessory apartment is handled a little bit differently, so that the current definition only allows for family members, so the definition gets expanded. I think it gets to the same point of increasing housing stock availability, but allows for it to be controlled.
All right, I agree with that.
And I think I'm going to add.
Others' thoughts?
I agree with you, Dan.
Okay, thank you. Let me just save this so I don't.
And if you can
it.
change that from yes back to a BA.
Will do.
Mark, real quick before you jump off that, something just stuck out on me on that. Back to daycare. Is there anything in other towns on doggy daycare? Am I talking crazy here, or have you seen that at all?
Yeah, people are adding it left and right. The other thing that I would think about adding here is adult daycare. I had a client once in Westwood. She was a retired lead nurse at the hospital locally, and she had a big post road house in Westwood and wanted to give back by opening it up during the daytime to adults who had, recovering from surgery or early stages of dementia. And the idea was that the people, their children in all likelihood, would drive them there in the morning, go to work, and pick them up as they would with their children on the way back home. And she would take care of them during the course of the day. I argued to the land court when we got denied that it was an educationally exempt use because they were going to do things like cooking and discuss current events and yada, yada, all of which has been proven to forestall the early effects of Alzheimer's. And Judge Kilbourne, the Chief Justice at the land court at the time, said it wasn't educational, it was a warehouse. He really ticked me off. And so in many of the 75 bylaws I've done since then, I put adult daycare and I've regulated it like family daycare. So you can have up to 15 adults and they come, and it's not, it's a lowest level of adult care. So you're not administering meds or anything like that. It's pretty low key. It's called social daycare by the Department of Health.
I think that from what you're describing, that would make a lot of sense to add. So, and I just want to remind you just to change that Y back to a BA, an accessory apartment in SR district.
Yeah.
And thank you. But I think adding in adult social daycare makes sense, and then also doggy daycare as well.
I'll try to.
If you go to the last cell, and just press tab, it'll automatically add a row for you. So if you go to,
I'll try to keep the order of this a little bit more so that we're not equating dogs and old people, but whatever.
That's good, actually.
Yeah, if you go to the last, to the far right in the last line, and you just press tab, it'll create a new line for you.
Oh, okay.
Mark,
So
can I ask?
now right there, you go to the last cell. So
I'll fix it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I have a question. If we are allowing the potential for adult daycare,
Yeah.
they still have to be licensed by the state, I assume? Is there some sort of licensure?
I don't think that there's licensure for it. Hang on. Let me look at the definitions here.
I feel like there's such an opportunity for not good actors to do something, or to not be, I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you.
So just by us including this doesn't mean that automatically someone could create one. It would, that's my only concern. The mechanism for how do we make sure that it's something that's legitimate.
Well, let me see if I didn't put it in your new definitions, I put it in somebody else's. So just hang on.
Well, maybe then it shouldn't be done by.
So the answer, I'm just looking it up. So mass.gov/adult-day-health-licensure addresses the issue on point. Department of Public Health licenses adult day health programs, regardless of whether the program participates in Mass Health or not.
Yeah, it's adult, as those terms are defined by the Commonwealth's Executive Office of Elder Affairs, serving not more than 15 persons. So it refers back to a state definition, but I don't know if there's a state license required. That definition is pretty old at this point. Let me look at that, see if I can find out if a license is required.
It does appear the answer is yes.
Okay. I'll add the license requirement to the definition.
Yeah. It's an adult day health program license is what they're calling it.
Okay, good.
Okay. An adult day health license?
Health program.
Health program, okay. Okay, great. Do you need a license for doggy daycare?
I don't know, but you need a fenced-in yard.
Every time I take a walk in the conservation land behind my house, I see somebody with a leash and 12 dogs.
I believe you do if you, depending upon whether the dogs stay overnight or not. If they stay overnight, it is defined as a kennel.
Right, exactly, yeah. But
If
they're
they
just being dropped
don't,
off
if
in the
if they're just
daytime,
dropped off, I don't believe Massachusetts currently requires it.
Okay.
If you have more than 4 dogs, you have to maintain a kennel license.
right. Well, I'm glad we got that in the rearview mirror. I'll make a next draft of that, circulate it, we'll sign off on it, put it in the bank. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the signs. So it was mystifying why you had one set of regulations for all of town, except the minuscule sign overlay district, which is really quite small. It's your downtown, as you would well imagine. I thought about making the sign overlay district the generic sign bylaw, but it's very demanding in some ways. And I don't know that the signs prescribed for downtown, for example, would work in an industrial district. So that's probably why you have a generic sign bylaw to cover situations outside the downtown. I don't think there's a conflict between them. I added that, for example, in section 6.2, which is the generic sign bylaw, that this bylaw does not apply in the sign overlay district. And I added in the sign overlay district that this bylaw only applied in the sign overlay district. So they should never conflict with each other. There is a whole lot of inconsistency between terms that may or may not be intended to mean the same thing. So, for example, types of signs, there's only a certain, not infinite number of sign types. And you've got some that apparently, they're pretty clearly in both districts, but you're using different terminology for them. So I wasn't happy with having to cull through all that and make it homogeneous. That's kind of where it's at. I'm almost,
If you give Tom a call, he can give you some history on that.
Yeah.
They were created at different times by different stakeholders.
Yeah.
So that's why you're seeing some confusion. The historical intent of the overlay district, which is just the downtown area, was to get better control of the downtown areas and do some commonality of sign types without impacting the rest of the town. So it was a decision to make that effectively a higher controlled area than the rest of the town, but still have some elements so that we wouldn't have the signs from like the 1950s where you have the blinking neon signs and things like that that were jutting out from buildings. So that's the historical reason, but they were written by different groups or copied from, the bases came from different groups, and that's the reason for. So the ability to put it into common areas, very helpful.
All right, so I don't have a problem in terms of conflict with the way that they operate today. So I don't see the need to try to make one bylaw out of it. I think it's okay to have them as two different bylaws for two different intended areas. Although I think the sign overlay district is enormously detailed, and it's almost like it forms a major part of your bylaw. It's 20 pages long. But having taken the trouble to renumber it, I don't, I'm done. Reformatted.
So for those of you that have that know the history and have been a part of this, any other thoughts on that? I'm trying to summarize what was a lot of debate at town meeting and many other meetings down to a comprehensible explanation.
Yeah, I mean, the whole push behind it was to have a bit of a homogeneous look downtown and have our signs look like they do in Melrose, to be pretty, and that was the push. And what Dan said, to get rid of some of those, arguably garish in these times, large signs. There was a sign bylaw committee that took their work very, very seriously. So I think that's where you see the intensity of that bylaw.
Yeah, I think that's well said. It was intense.
I don't think that if we
my
don't have to get rid
recommendation-
of it, I don't think we should. Because again, it's one of those
Okay.
things that the people who were involved with that tend to still be involved in town, and they take great pride in that bylaw. So keeping it is politically astute. It is, I think, a polite way of putting it. And for
Okay.
what it's worth, I think it actually has worked well to get some commonality of sign design. The signs are still unique, but they have the exterior illumination, down with downward facing lights and things like that, that is creating a nicer feel, so to speak. So more classic feel.
Okay. The other thing that I've dropped on you and that you owe me a sushi menu order on is this performance standard section. Can you
Well, we
see
have two
that?
sushi restaurants, so it shouldn't be a problem. They're almost right across the street from each other. They're
Well,
both
get
highly
your pencil,
rated.
sharpen it up, and start ordering. So you've got lights, you've got noise, you've got site development standards, you've got pedestrian and vehicular traffic access, and I think there's utilities comes next. And you've got aesthetic standards, utilities. The major numbers, the ones that aren't indented are the ones you've got. Fiscal analysis standards, and then so those are the categories to sharpen up your pencil and say check or I'm not ordering that. If you order the whole thing, we just went through this in Medford with the very capable Medford in-house staff, and they did a great job updating it. I wrote this probably 20 years ago. So, for example, Medford has its own traffic engineer, and he updated the language in the traffic section to have citations to the latest ITE manuals and state DOT manuals and things of that sort. And they also looked at the other sections as well. I think it's a matter of just deciding whether some of these standards are too complicated for Wakefield, but otherwise, they're in towns your size, and we could go with the whole thing if that's what you decided to do. But I want you to make sure that you're all familiar with it, because this is going to, I think this town meeting is a major undertaking. You're regulating in a way that, I think for the most part, for example, just on lighting, you're saying, you're probably saying now that lighting will not cause overspill or glare. That's fine, but this says heights of poles, types of lights, types of fixtures, noise. We will not have noise that disturbs neighbors. Well, this incorporates right here the DEP's noise policy, which is 10 decibels above ambient. So this is, it's not complicated, but it's certainly more sophisticated than minimize disturbance of your neighbor, which is your current standard for the most part.
And I look at something like that as actually making it so that it's enforceable.
Yeah.
If you don't, the current one is admittedly not enforceable.
No, in the context of site plan approval, you already have standards for parking and signs and landscaping to a certain extent, especially in parking lots. But you don't, the rest of it, you say, do the best you can, and we'll decide whether we like it or not. Here, we're objectifying that and saying, don't make any noise louder than 10 decibels above ambient, as measured at the property boundary of the receiving land use. That's a very objective standard. You take a read of the ambient, you get, usually that's late at night when it's at its quietest. And then if the noise is, when the noise comes out, if it's more than 10 dBA above that, it's a violation and it can be shut down. And that's what the state does with stationary sources, new stationary sources. Anytime you build a big building and it's got rooftop HVAC equipment or ventilators, those things have to comply with the state standard. So I guess, Dan, what I'm saying is, next meeting, we're going to do the things coming up on your warrant, which is great. Maybe the meeting after that, we could start with this and everybody could just send me back their sushi menu filled out. And I would take the time to cull it and see where people's thinking is. And if it's all pretty easy to come to a consensus, I'll just announce the consensus. If you know, and we'll go from there.
Dan, weren't we gonna have a separate meeting with other board members? Wasn't that brought up?
That was, although in discussing with Mark, we've been actually covering a lot of elements as well. We can certainly schedule another meeting of the smaller board, and for this section, I think it probably does make sense to get the input to make sure we get input from the other boards, specifically the Board of Appeals and Planning Board. So Joan, Kevin in particular, if you can highlight to the other committees that you serve on that this is under evaluation, I think that would be very helpful so that we can get the input from more people, because this is probably going to be the piece that in a lot of ways they will want to have input on more than some of the other aspects.
And we're not going to discuss it on April 1st because we're doing your warrant. So we've got a month more or less between today and this.
Correct. The meeting after that will be April 5th, following our normal schedule, will be April 15th. So it'll be a very taxing meeting. Sorry, I couldn't resist the humor for that.
The 15th is Patriots Day.
It is a holiday, actually, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Today is technically a holiday too, but not in not in Middlesex County. In Suffolk County, it's a holiday. It's Evacuation Day, observed. So I'm not sure if that affected you, Ann, at all or not.
Do we all know the story of Evacuation Day? If you read Washington's biography by, I can't remember the author's name, Ron, he's written a few of these things. Washington had the guns from Ticonderoga dragged all the way from Lake George in the winter through roadless areas. And the Brits woke up one morning and they were sitting on top of the hill in Dorchester. And that's Evacuation Day. I'm more impressed with dragging the guns all the way from Fort Ticonderoga.
That's a long way.
That's a long way.
And that's literally dragging. Okay, so if the 15th is a holiday. That week, which is also the local April break week.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So I'm not sure how that will impact people. Is there,
Well, the only day I could do it that week is Tuesday.
okay,
My
so,
brothers invited me down. My two brothers and have invited me down to North Carolina, and I'm going to go down on Wednesday.
so you are
I'm av-
available on Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm available
Okay.
on Tuesday.
Others?
I'm available Tuesday. It's fine.
Same here.
I am
And
as
that's
well.
it. Eric?
Available most days, yeah.
Okay. Kevin? I think there was a nod that I saw from you. I'm available. So let's plan for April 16th. So I want to make sure that it's not causing conflict for people with the other meetings that they have. And that'll be
And-
1 week before the municipal elections.
And I will send an email to you, Dan, and to the committee generally announcing immediately as of tomorrow when I send the email that we're going to take a sushi menu taste test of section 6.3. Everybody should print it out separately and mark it with a pencil like you do at a sushi restaurant. And if they can scan it and send it back to me, that'd be grand.
And if you want to eat at any of the sushi restaurants in Wakefield, they're very, very good. I've eaten it, the two primary ones, and absolutely delicious. They're both on Main Street. So if you like sushi, by all means, come to Wakefield. You will get it. And I'm not giving a fishtail here.
You're lucky. Ours shut down just recently.
So
Well, Medford's got an all-you-can-eat one in Medford. Pretty good.
Wow.
$25, all you can eat.
Wow.
okay. So with that, anything else for tonight? Otherwise, the next meeting will be on April 1st. The primary topic of that will be the upcoming warrant articles that affect bylaws. There are a whole host of them. The town meeting itself will be April 29th. So we will not be meeting on that day. That's when it will start. I anticipate that that town meeting will last at least 2, if not 3 nights, given the number of topics that are at that. On the April 1st meeting, I anticipate that we will also review both MBTA community overlay districts. I had not seen that the planning board had yet taken up and scheduled a hearing prior to the town meeting for the second MBTA communities overlay district. And, depending upon if and when that actually happens, will determine whether that the second one would be deemed properly available, but it does have maps and so forth. So the content of it, I think we should review in any event, just for language consistency with the recodification. So in addition, there's the marijuana overlay that is coming up. There's also a separate bylaw to basically remove all marijuana bylaws from the bylaws themselves. So that's a separate article. So this particular set is quite extensive, this town meeting, as it relates to bylaws themselves. So that will be the topic of April 1st, no fooling on that. And then April 16th, 7 p.m. will be the following meeting where we will come back to this topic, and we'll talk about definitions and procedures and go over the sushi menu options. In the meantime, for those who serve on the other boards, if you can let those boards know as well. And I'll see if we can set up a separate short meeting with the smaller committee, just to effectively go over the sushi menu options and potentially get some early feedback to Mr. Bobrowski. So that way
That's great.
we'll have some opinions, and again, that will cause it to be circulated to a wider audience as well. So that's the plans on that. Anything else? Otherwise, in the agenda itself, there are a whole series of holidays coming up that you're probably aware of. Tomorrow is the first day of spring, according to the sun. The weather may not feel like spring. After all, we are in New England, so one never knows what season it is. If you don't like it, wait about 20 minutes. It will change. This coming Sunday, we've got Palm Sunday, followed by Holly, and then we've got next week being Holy Week. We've got Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, and then that'll be followed by Easter Monday, which is our next meeting, and April Fool's Day, and then later we have the Orthodox Easter as well. So but that's all after the next meeting. So in case anyone was wondering where the holidays are coming from, I try to do the holidays between the meetings up to and including the next meeting. And I look those up on a variety of places to try and be as respectful to the community as I can. So this way, as you meet people who have different backgrounds, you're at least aware of hopefully some of the various holidays of different cultures and our neighbors that we live in community with. So with that, take a motion to adjourn.
Good night, all, while you do.
Thank you very much, Attorney Bobrowski. Much appreciated. So Ann has made the
Thank you,
motion to adjourn.
Thank
Do
you
we
all.
have it? Do we have a second?
Second.
I think Kevin was quick on the second. Tim gets to record all of this. So with that, we will take our final vote of the evening. Kevin,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
yes, Joe,
That's-
Yes.
Oh, just this side. Okay.
and
Yes.
I voted in the affirmative. So with that, the meeting will adjourn at 8:52.